Check, check, 1 2 1 2 1 2. Check, check, 1 2 1 2 1 2. Check, check, 1 2 1 2 1. one two check check 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 check check 1 2 1 2 1 2 check check 1
becomes active. So I would say wait a few seconds before you talk, or else no one will hear you.
Sure. No, we're not.
Yeah, usually.
Boop, 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 boop.
You're welcome. Just someone turns. Yep, just like that. It's up to you if you leave it on or shut it off. Nope, you just gotta do off and on.
Good evening. Before we start, I just want to remind everyone that's here, if you would like to speak either in open forum or when we get to a certain agenda item, there are forms that are out in the main entry, and you do need to complete that form and turn it into Jake prior to speaking. Thanks. It is 6 o'clock, so I will call the board meeting to order. And we have board awards that we are going to give out tonight, and we need to amend the agenda because they were not listed under where we normally have them under correspondence. So, Justin?
Yep, President Wright, I'd like to make a motion to
amend the agenda, add board awards in this place at this time.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to add the board awards to this point of the agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that motion carries. DT.
Yeah, so we had Tom Scallon reach out to me and the board and nominate the following individuals for board awards: Dee Cirrus, Chef Rolando Molina, Ryan Harm, Denise Birkin, Lisa Canby, Kim Vaughn, and Lori Sweet. I don't know if we have any of those folks who are in attendance today. If you are, just stand up. We'll make sure we get their board awards to them, because when we were doing this, we thought we may be meeting virtually. So we'll make sure we get those board awards to them and get a picture with those. They are nutrition staff, and they have done yeoman's work and women's work this summer, getting meals out to students. As you're all aware, we were distributing meals on Mondays, and each Monday we would distribute 10 meals to students, and you could be a student in Norwalk or not. We just, as long as the meals lasted, we handed them out to students. And each Monday we would distribute 10 meals, 5 lunches and 5 breakfasts. And so Dee led that effort, and then these are several of her staff members. Chef Molina just did this out of the goodness of his heart. He helps, of course, lead our culinary arts program at the high school. And so want to recognize those staff members for all their hard work this summer. Also want to give a shout out to several other staff members, and I just got to get to one spot who Dee wanted to make sure we recognized as well. And so we had several other staff members who helped out with the meal distribution from time to time. And so several school administrators and other staff members helped out with that. All right. And so here you go. Chris Larson, Chris Basinger, Shelley Veru, Beth Ward, Rodney Martinez, Jody Radigan, Chad and Michelle Weedman, Sheila Taylor, Jill Anderson, Al Lammers, Eric Neeson, Jan Jensen, and Tom Scallon. And also Kathy Elkin and Shauna Neifert, and then everyone else, if she forgot anybody, who participated in the summer meal distribution. So I would like to recognize them. And then also nominated by Tom Scallon was Marla Frantum for all of the work that she's done to connect with students during the school closure, and specifically around the sign parade that happened for our seniors, and all the social media recognition. She went through and recognized all of our seniors through Twitter, at least, might have been on Facebook as well, and just trying to give our seniors a good, congratulations as they finished up their senior year here at Norwalk. And so those are our board awardees tonight.
And you'll present the medals to them. Are any of them in the audience?
Yes. We'll make sure that they get those awards.
He's coming to fix the mic. Okay, moving on. This is the time in the agenda where we have open forum. And I think I just spoke a few minutes ago about if visitors wish to speak to an agenda item, it comes before the board and you fill out a form for Jake. I know some of you are probably here to speak to the Return to Learn plan. And so we are asking that you wait until we get to that item on the agenda. But Jake, were there other open forum items at this point? No, okay.
Just the Return to Learn.
Just return, okay. So then I would move to the consent agenda. Are there any questions on the consent agenda?
Yeah, Mary Beth, quick question. I guess DT, the late addition to the resignation list, is that pending suitable replacement?
No, that one we have some areas that I can't go into in public, but we believe are extraordinary measures that need to grant that. Ran that by Mary Beth. And Michelle, I don't think, had any concerns about that late resignation from an employee experience standpoint.
And then another note I had pre-meeting was the updating of the address for the teaching strategy contract. I think that got amended. I just haven't been into the new link.
Yeah, we'll make sure that that address gets corrected.
Any other questions from board members?
I'll ask one more then, I guess. Kate, or Jake, the received financial reports C1 through 5, is that the final 6/30 fiscal year numbers, or?
They would be tentative, Justin. At this point, they're based on both the bank reconciliation, but we still have some adjusting journal entries and items that'll probably need to be pulled back from a fund balance basis, but it'd be correct on a cash balance basis at that point. So yes, but we have not cleaned out the books. Under GAAP accounting and Iowa code, we have 60 days after June 30th to make those adjusting journal entries.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda, approve the consent agenda?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The consent agenda is approved. Michelle, can you hear them down there when they're, okay. I just want to make sure everybody can hear each other. Yeah. Okay, we're running out of batteries in our mics. Okay, correspondence. So this is a new item that we added, the board subcommittee reports. And so I will ask board members that are on the subcommittees to give a 1 to 2 minute just quick update of if you've had a meeting since the last time we met as a full board, to give the board an update. So we'll start with capital projects. Whoever that is, David or Brian.
So we haven't had any NPEC meetings in between the last board meeting and this board meeting, so there's nothing to really report on. We released SD into DD, and we're just letting the consultants do their work.
Employee experience, Michelle and I are on that subcommittee, and we did not have a meeting in July, and we'll be meeting again here, I think at the end of the month, after our board retreat, so we don't have a report at this point. Financial services, Justin?
Yeah, we this didn't quite qualify because we met on 6/16, but the two topics primarily in that discussion, one is going to be prevalent with today's meeting, the bond issuance that took place today, although the notes I submitted to the meeting has an erroneous date on that issuance. We listened to Piper in terms of a virtual meeting talking about the structure of the bond issues to be sold, the coupon and call features that we were looking at or at least approximating for, and how we would discuss the potential premium on that principal for the rates that were being issued. And the second topic, Kate presented some information about the open enrollment for the staff and the changes in healthcare plans as we have moved away from our primary PPO 100 plan, and what those numbers mean, and also knowing that some of those changes were then redeployed back into the salary schedule.
Good job, Justin.
Thanks, Justin. Let's see, instructional services. I think that's Justin or Michelle. Justin, is that Justin again?
I also wrote a little bit on that one too. So I guess next month I'm off. We met on July 6th, primarily to talk about another big topic on today's agenda, the Return to Learn plan. DT and Don went through the 25 pages and talking about the key highlights, about the 7 sections, the involvement of administrators, staff, parents, and community members in developing the plan, discussions on face coverings and PPE for the district, spacing and social distancing, survey results, child care potential, parent waiver and choices, staff choices, and integration of missed standards from the 2019 and 2020 school years. We also discussed some of the timeline that brought us from 7-6 when we met to where we are tonight in terms of other groups outside of the district, Warren County health officials, local superintendents, parent surveys, and the distribution to staff and parents for feedback.
Okay, thanks, Justin. And then policy, Brian, do you want to cover that? I mean, do you have a mic or no?
I do know. Dr. Barriers. Policy meetings, most of what we reviewed and discussed is already on the agenda for today for the second readings, and we have another board meeting this Thursday at 5.
Okay, thank you. DT, the final review of your 1920 superintendent goals.
Yeah, so we are at that time, no major update. So each of the goals were met, although we were 3 days late delivering the transportation plan, so apologies for that. And then for Oviatt Elementary, we have substantial completion of that project, but we don't have final occupancy. And so we missed the deadline on that, which was June 1st, 2020. And then, of course, the FastBridge data that's still pending. Given the interruption in the school year this past year, we don't have enough data. And so we'll move that over, and hopefully we can implement that goal this next year.
Okay. The board retreat update. In the pack or in the agenda, you will find a tentative agenda, and that is coming up on July 23rd, which is a Thursday. So again, that agenda is still tentative, although I sent an email to all of you asking if you had specific items or other items you wanted to include on that, to please send those to me. And I would ask if you could get those to me maybe by Thursday of this week, Wednesday or Thursday. That would be appreciated. And I think we have an article up here. One of the articles that we'll be reviewing, we're going to add another one along with the board assessment tool. So just know there'll be more information coming. And that on the agenda, the board assessment will also be linked, and I'm working on that, and I'll hopefully have that done by the end of this week. So other than that, we have Leader in Me training. We'll talk about board goals, subcommittee minutes and reports, and Return to Learn plan, and a board assessment tool approval. So, and a communication presentation from Tiffany. So if there are other items, please let me know if you would like those added. And right now we're set to meet at 2 p.m. Is that still at the district office, DT?
We have not determined the final location for that yet.
So, okay. So more to come on that, unless anybody has questions or comments right now on it.
Since we have a lot of homework, Mary Beth, can we get some reminders as we get closer to that date?
Yes. And to be honest, like the board assessment tool, I'm not going to have you fill it out. I'm just going to introduce it, and then we'll work on that for a later meeting, because we do have kind of a heavy agenda. So I'll try not to load you down too much on that right away. It'll just be an introduction. But yes, we'll send reminders. Any other questions? Comments? Okay, DT, the COVID-19 update. Do you want to do?
Yeah, so we have a lot that's going on in terms of planning in the district. And so obviously the Return to Learn plan draft was released last week to our full staff. We had other staff members who have been working on the implementation plans at the building level with the principals. And so last week on Wednesday, we released that, had a all-staff meeting. And so right now the staff can submit questions through a Google form, and we have multiple team members, administrative team members who are answering those questions. And we'll roll that out sometime this week so that those are still coming in. And so we will roll out that information this week. The other thing that was a big event last week was we released the Return to Learn plan to our community through the board agenda. And so we sent out an Infinite Campus parent messenger with that information. So we have a Return to Learn draft or plan draft Google form that's out there. And so parents, community members, students, staff members can provide feedback through that venue as well. We have had multiple surveys that have gone out. We had a after the fact VEEO, Voluntary Educational Enrichment Opportunities survey that went out. So thank you to Don Shiro for leading that work. We've got some results from that helps to inform if we continue with an online option or if we have to implement a full online option, how to approach that work with feedback from our community and our parents and students. We had an initial Return to Learn survey, and that was completed by about almost 1,289 responses on that. And so that was that helped to inform our decision making as we went into the Return to Learn planning. On a regular basis, I've been meeting probably at least once a week, more often 2 to 3 times a week with Heartland AEA superintendents as we discuss the dynamics around COVID-19 and this pandemic, school closures, Return to Learn planning. Also, when the DE offers their regular webinars, sometimes they're twice a week. They didn't have any last week, but they have been about once a week on average. I've been attending those along with other staff members, and if I can't attend those, they record those and I go back and I watch them. Of course, reading all the guidance that's come out from the Department of Education, Department of Public Health. This last week, Warren County superintendents met with representatives from Warren County Health Services because we have guidance from the state that we have to work with our local county health departments as superintendents and school districts to navigate through this and make decisions locally on a range of topics, a lot of them, of course, health and safety. And so that is presenting certain challenges. There are, many superintendents around the state that are asking, and public health departments are asking for some guidance from the state level around, topics that are coming out through our Return to Learn plan draft comments, such as what are the procedures for quarantining, if you have to quarantine an individual, or as a classroom, or as the building, as the whole district. And so that's some of the guidance that we're asking for and working with our local county health officials to do that. As we're pursuing this work, we are getting comments that come in and they start to funnel into kind of common areas and common questions. We will be releasing tomorrow morning an FAQ document that is kind of consolidating a lot of that. Again, thanks to Don Shiro for leading that work. So that'll be on the district website, the COVID-19 webpage on our website. And start to answer some of the questions that are common questions that we're receiving. The big ticket issues that right now that I would say are emerging are whether or not the board will, and the administrative team will recommend and the board would approve the requirement for students to wear masks. And so we're receiving a lot of questions and comments about that. The initial feedback is we have about 50% of the respondents on the RTL plan draft survey that say we should require them. And then it's kind of an even split between we should not require them, and not certain if we should. And so that's put up against the guidance from the Department of Education, working with the Iowa Department of Public Health, that right now has come out and said the requiring of face coverings for staff and students is not recommended. And so there are some strong feelings on either side of this debate, and some of that certainly is coming from our staff. And so we're receiving those comments and suggestions from staff, from community members, parents, and so we will have a decision to make around that. the way we approached that work and most of our health and safety recommendations is we convened early on in this process as when we knew what we had to do for return to learn planning. We asked our nurses to weigh in on that. And so in early June, they made the recommendation that you see is right now in our plan. And so we did work through our local health experts, our nursing staff. Also last week, we met with our return to learn plan draft parent advisory committee. And so we have some amazing community representatives on that. People who represent state agencies, people who are in the medical field, and we have representation across grade levels. And so it's really a wonderful group. And so they've had access to the plan. They were able to comment on the plan and the document. And then we went through and did a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so we're going through that based on their feedback. Made a few adjustments to the plan prior to it being attached to the agenda on Friday. And then we've got some feedback from them. Another area that we'll need to clarify, I believe, in the plan is, and we'll be talking about this tomorrow at our administrative team, principals and executive cabinet meeting, is clarifying what we would do for a hybrid plan if we are required to maintain 6 feet of social distancing in classrooms. And so conversation right now is centering around, do we do like an AB day or an AB week? So we'll be having that conversation and bring a final recommendation back to the board, because that's, we received some feedback that we need more clarity around that item in the plan. And so moving forward, again, we have an executive cabinet and principals meeting tomorrow morning where we will be talking about the feedback we received, and we will be making some decisions going forward. That will then be placed before the board on July 23rd for possible approval. And then we also will start to roll out some of our implementation plans that contain more details at the building levels. And so that work has been ongoing, and the board members will have access to those plans as well before the 23rd. So there's a lot going on. There, again, are some passionate arguments, and there is a range of opinions depending on the topic you're talking about. And so we find ourselves as a district, district leaders, the board, parents, students, in this awkwardness of we want certain things, and we can do anything we want to, we just can't do everything. And so we can get everybody back to school, but I don't know that there's a way, and we've talked about this as an administration, that we can socially distance everybody if everybody comes back. We can offer online opportunities, and so we can do that, but that's not going to be the same as being in person. We can do a hybrid model, and there are some strong feelings about like an AB a day or AB week format. We can require masks, or we could not. And so there's no. It's a challenge because we certainly aren't going to make everybody happy with our decisions, but just know that we're going to do the best we possibly can to keep staff and students safe through this process. And so that's the driving, motivating factor. And we will continue to monitor CDC guidance, Iowa Department of Public Health guidance, Warren County Health Services, and then lean on local experts as well who have expertise in this area and are dealing with it on the front lines or as the last line of defense with some of our medical professionals. And so I'll stop there and see if there are any questions about the Return to Learn plan draft that either Kate, myself, or Dawn can answer.
Well, at this point, why don't we have forms that, if you filled out a form, we'll welcome the public comments. Why don't we do that first, and then give the board time to ask questions as well. So, Jake,
yeah,
I will remind you. I'm sorry, Jake. One item. You do have a 3-minute time limit to speak, and the microphone is here, so we'll have you come down. So, Jake, I'll let you call the people down since you have the forms. Is that okay?
yes. So I have 2 forms here. If there's anybody else who wants to fill out a form, they're out here on the desk. Go grab one, bring it to me. I will call you up here. You'll come up to the mic. I do have some forms here. You have the 3-minute time frame. I'll hold up a 1-minute warning and then a 30-second warning as well. And then I'll ask you to stop at 3 minutes. So I will do these in the order that you bring them up. First up is Matt Denner. And again, you just come up to the microphone, state your name, and then you have 3 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you for allowing the public to comment today. My name is Matt Denner. I am a friend to multiple Norwalk teachers. My partner is a teacher. She is a type 1 diabetic, and I am extremely concerned about her health if the Return to Learn plan does not require masks, particularly for middle and high school students, and if there is not a hybrid model that allows actual social distancing. Many of you, I'm sure, have a good sense of what the classrooms are going to look like with the number of students in each class. It's going to be nearly impossible to keep even a 3-foot level of distance between most students, and that's particularly true if we don't have a hybrid model. As you all know, there were COVID cases in the district early on during this pandemic. As the number of cases continues to rise at a steady rate, there's no reason to believe that that won't happen again. And if the goal of this plan and a return to the classroom is to reduce chaos and to reduce trauma for students, I can't imagine how that's going to happen if the school has to repeatedly close down, if students get sick, if their parents get sick because they brought the disease home, if their teachers get sick, and quite honestly, if ultimately some of their teachers die. And right now, the choice that teachers are facing, especially if they're immunocompromised, is potentially to do the work that they love or to stay home and protect their health and give up something that they love to do. I don't want to see any teachers die. I don't want to see the teacher in my family die. I don't want to see the people that I care about die because we didn't take the appropriate steps. I know many people have talked about how the American Association of Pediatricians has recommended a return to school. I think everyone wants to see that happen in some form. But the AAP also recommends, at least for middle and high school students, universal wearing of masks. I don't know why our state has not gone along with that same recommendation, but this district should strongly consider that possibility and consider any possibilities that can be, taken to avoid the loss of life. And I really hope that you guys will consider, at the very least, a mask requirement for middle and high school students as recommended by the AAP, and that you will strongly consider a hybrid plan to make sure that students can stay safe and that this disease does not run rampant through this city as it has
Thanks,
through
Matt.
places in Arizona and Florida.
You have 3 minutes here.
Thank you very much.
Interrupt you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Denner.
Okay, next up we have Stephanie.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Dr. Stephanie Apple, and I'm not a medical doctor. I have my PhD, but I am a post-secondary educator, and I have a professional background also in emergency management. I currently work for Des Moines Area Community College, and since March I've been serving on our coronavirus Come Back Strong Task Force, which has been working to develop all of our policies and procedures for our 65,000 individuals we serve every year across our 5 campuses and centers. I understand and appreciate the conversations that you all and that the educators in this district have been having, because I've been spending hours and hours every week having similar conversations with people that I care about how we are going to continue to educate students and to also keep them safe, and the educators that we love and cherish safe as well. I'm also a parent to 5 students in this district, and so I'm here because I care about them. Oh, I'm also the wife of a high school educator who teaches high school for Des Moines Public Schools. So we've been very engaged in that work as well, and I have several friends who are working on the Return to Learn plan for that district. I would echo everything that Matt said. I truly believe that the state of Iowa and the Department of Education is failing our educators and communities by saying they specifically do not recommend mask policies. I believe that that is an absolute essential requirement. We are requiring that at Des Moines Area Community College. One of the reasons in the conversation was because if you have some students who are coming to campus without, you're really putting everybody at jeopardy. So you may as well no one may as well wear a mask. I know that it does reduce some if one is wearing and the other is not. Trust me, I understand, I've read this. But I think that it's something that we strongly need to consider. Also, social distancing. I also think that masks have become a political statement. And I think that if you make it a recommendation that people can wear them optionally, then you stigmatize that in our school. Whether it's somebody who is wearing it or not, you open students up to that. And that's one more point of controversy that we do not need in our halls. I have an educator in my household, and I love him dearly. And I believe that Des Moines Public Schools made the right decision to be able to offer a hybrid option and to offer online virtual options to keep their educators safe. I also have been I was looking specifically with folks this morning at liability and COVID, and I believe that if the Norwalk School District, I'm not an attorney, but I do believe that if the Norwalk School District is not living up to the fullest recommendation of the CDC, which is masking and social distancing, that there is liability there potentially. So I would encourage the district to look at that.
You have reached your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Dr. Apple.
Next up, we have Mindy.
Hi. My big concern is my student. She's going to be a senior this year. She wants to come back to school, and I want her to come back to school and enjoy everything that senior year entitles her. However, she does have a chronic medical condition. She has a connective tissue disorder. She got walking pneumonia a couple years ago and was out of school for a month and took months to recover from it. I wear a mask to protect you, and you wear a mask to protect me. I don't want my daughter exposed because it is actually life-threatening to her. The Secretary of Education said 0.2% of students will die once we return to school. In our community, that's 60 kids. 60 kids that then other kids have to deal with the death of. I don't want my child to be one of the 60. I'm not willing to give her up. I don't know any parent that is willing to sacrifice their child. You guys have a choice here. We need to be an example to other communities and put a mask policy in place. I was a surgical nurse for years, so the people who tell me that you can't breathe in a mask, I tell them they're insane, or no surgery would last longer than 20 minutes because the surgeon would die. You guys have to do this right. We get one chance at it. 5 schools had to stop their athletic programs, their baseball and softball programs today because of positive tests. The Des Moines City Council just approved that the police department now has to wear masks when they cannot social distance. We have one chance at this because even one student or one teacher dying is too many. Norwalk is a good community. We need to be an example for everybody else and get this right.
Hey, ma'am, could you say your name into the microphone for us, please?
Mindy Mulvihill, you've met my daughter.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, up next I have Jesse.
Hi, I'm Jesse Stumbaugh. This wouldn't be a good school board meeting if there wasn't opposing views, so here it comes. I think as you're talking, DT McGee, there's a lot of feelings, there's a lot of passion about this subject, but as you keep referring to, we have to go back to the health professionals and what are they recommending. We all agree no one wants to get sick, but this is a virus you can't hide from. Continuing to say stay safe, it isn't something you can avoid. It's just a matter of when people come in contact with it. And when we look at the research, kids that come in contact with the virus do amazingly well. On the CDC website, it said since April, 3 kids passed from COVID that tested positive. And even on the website, they claimed that it's unclear if COVID was responsible for that. So there's a lot of fear with this, but I think when we look at how viruses spread, how our immune systems respond, that getting our kids back in school and having strong immune systems creates a herd immunity that will help us prevent the teachers and everyone else from getting sick as well. I think another good example is if we look at our child care facilities. Child care facilities have been open this entire time. They have not been wearing face masks with those children, and I have not heard of one event in the state of Iowa where a child care facility had a corona outbreak. I think we need to look at the measures that are appropriate for Warren County itself and not get sucked into the fear and pressure of what's happening in other parts of the state or other parts of the country specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you, Jesse.
Danielle, you're up.
Thank you for letting me speak. I am openly opinionated as far as masks go. I feel they should be required. I think that's just the bare minimum if we're going to put kids back into school and teachers back into school. Like, I have to leave Norwalk to go grocery shopping to find a store with the majority amount of people masking. That's just a risk I don't want to take. I don't have to leave Norwalk to go grocery shopping and to school my kids safely. I appreciate the idea of online learning, but I think kids do need to be in school, and I think masks is the safest way we can do that. I don't have a lot to add besides that. I just feel like masks is the bare minimum that we can do to keep teachers, staff, and students safe. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am, can you state your name in the microphone? Sorry.
Danielle Lynn.
Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle.
That's the last one. Okay. Thank you for those that provided comments. We appreciate that information. At this point, I'm going to open it up for board comments, questions. Yes, I was going to do that. And one, last thing for the public too. DT mentioned in the draft plan, there is a link there that you can provide comments, and you'll be able to see the FAQ out tomorrow, right? You said on the website, so that would be another way. Email DT, any of the staff, myself, a board member, if you want to provide feedback that way too. We are compiling all of that into that FAQ document. And there will be a town hall coming up. DT, I'll let you talk about that.
Yes, so we haven't determined the format of that at this point in time, but we will push that information out most likely this week. But on August 22nd, there will be at 6 p.m. a town hall meeting. And the town hall meetings that occurred earlier during the school closure. Did I say August? Sorry, July. Getting ahead of myself. August 24th, we're going back to school, hopefully. July 22nd is the town hall meeting. Thank you. And that will be at 6 o'clock. We'll make sure we push out through Parent Messenger, and it'll be on the website where that will be located. And so in the spring, when I did town hall meetings, it was me doing those town hall meetings because so many of the decisions were flowing through me, and I had to make decisions and recommendations to the board. And some of those that didn't have to vet with the board was some of the special policy waivers and provisions and proclamations we had in place. And that town hall meeting, there's going to be a larger team that addresses questions, because now this is truly a team effort. And so, yes, there are some recommendations that are flowing through me, but there are a lot of decisions that are being made by our team, which the decision-making team is the executive cabinet and the principals. But our decisions are being formed by a lot of other people, the implementation teams at the building, and that's primarily teachers, but also some nurses, counselors, student advocates. And also our nursing staff has a large hand in some of our provisions about isolation rooms and, of course, some of the other health provisions that are in the plan. So on July 22nd, that will be that town hall meeting, sorry, for that, messing up that date.
Questions, comments, concerns? I'm looking at both ends, so.
DT, do you have any kind of major revelations from talking with our peer superintendents here in Warren County on the major differences between our plans and, say, our neighbors to the east or south?
Yeah, I think as their plans start to emerge, there's some differences in timing. I think some districts are looking at being back fully in person, but they may be approaching it with some early outs, different than we are, maybe to allow some cleaning. Indianola has a year-round school, and the last I knew, or I had a conversation with Superintendent Sadoff about that, they had pushed the start date back for that year-round school into August, and so I'm not sure where they're at with that. Some of the other superintendents in the metro area, I know there's some board meetings tonight where they're looking at approving some of the plans, and I know that there are some districts that are asking their boards to require face masks. And so we will know some more after tonight about some of the approved plans. We've got our meetings that are fairly close together, and so we've approached that a little bit differently. And not every, of course, school board in the metro area or the state is making decisions tonight. Some are next week, some are the week after that. I do want to share, and there's some guidance here just from our attorneys that do say we can require students and staff members to wear masks. And so from an attorney standpoint, we can do that. There are some qualifiers there around if we decide to go down that route, and some of these qualifiers are also listed in the FAQ document that the Department of Ed has put out, is there can be liability both ways. And so if you require masks, there's some liabilities if you don't enforce that. And if you do not require masks, there may be some liability that way as well. But our attorneys have said that we can require mask wearing. And we have some provisions in our plan that we are stating that students are most likely going to be required to wear masks. If we're running transportation where we can't maintain social distancing, which is the current plan, face coverings will be required. And then at other times, specifically the secondary campus, most likely with passing periods, requiring face coverings for our students when, again, social distancing is going to be harder to come by. So there may be some nuance in this as well. It may not be an all or nothing dynamic, and so that's some of the information we're getting back as well from some other superintendents and other districts is there may be provisions like if you cannot maintain social distancing that you require masks. Classrooms, buses, hallways, so on and so forth. Outdoors. That was some information that was recently shared at a meeting I was in with a medical health professional saying, even if you're outside and you can't maintain social distancing, this was more of a conversation around adults, not specifically for schools, but you should still wear a mask if you can't maintain social distancing, even if you're outside. And so those are pieces of feedback that we're receiving back from medical health professionals, other districts. We've got a shared spreadsheet that as we get closer to the 23rd, I'll provide more information on this topic because we have other districts that are starting to fill out that spreadsheet of whether or not they're requiring masks of staff and face coverings. for students and staff members. One thing I do want to point out is that we do have to allow for medical and religious exemptions for face coverings. And so that is something that if we do have a face covering requirement, there still may be some exemptions to that expectation for staff and for students.
You touched a little bit on the liability if we do have a required face covering policy. What are districts doing to enforce that, or to compliance is not quite the word I want to use here, but obviously if you're in that situation, what are some of the remedies to that if a student or a staff chooses or does not follow that policy?
Yeah, so if say they're required, and this is coming from the FAQ document from the Department of Ed, and so what they talk about is this is a non-exhaustive list of considerations. So some things to think about if you're going to require face coverings. What type of face coverings will be allowed, considering that some face coverings are for temporary use only and should be discarded once they become moist or handled inappropriately? Who will be responsible for ensuring the appropriate type of face coverings are worn? Who will be responsible for providing face coverings, and what measures will be taken to ensure they are sanitary? And so we already have 2,000 temporary, like the blue one I'm wearing. We already have those in the districts right now, so we will have some of those available in each building. And then we're ordering at least 2,000 cloth face coverings, just so we have those available for our staff and students that want them. Who will be responsible for yes, I already read that one off. Making sure they're sanitary. Who will be responsible for tracking the appropriate use and storage of face coverings during lunch and snack times, and during physical education and recess when wearing a cloth face covering during high-intensity activities may cause difficulty breathing? How will schools address students or staff with communication needs that may prohibit the use of a face covering? Who in the district is responsible for training staff and students in proper use and disposal or removal of face coverings so they are worn safely and correctly? How will the districts in non-public schools enforce requirements that face coverings be worn by students and staff, including whether this is considered a discipline infraction? Are there other laws or directives from other federal, state, or local agencies that may address the use of face coverings by school personnel? What are the implications for students and staff with health or other conditions, including those who may be unable to wear a face covering and, in doing so, may reveal personal health conditions? How will students or staff members who do not wish to wear a face covering or cannot due to a medical or other condition be considered? How will schools protect them from being singled out by their peers, and how will schools protect the privacy of students and staff? So, again, a non-exhaustive list, but there are considerations, whether you require them or not, that we have to think about. And one of the items that certainly has come up in our conversations internally is just making sure that people go home and wash their personal cloth face coverings on a nightly basis, or have a rotation, right, where you can bring a new one the next day.
I'll ask one more then.
Okay.
Obviously, in this plan, DT, we talk about it being fairly fluid, waiting for some different guidance and things, but maybe lay out for the board and our visitors kind of the timelines for decision making, and kind of as we prep from now till the projected start of school.
So I think one of the things the Department of Education has done well is ask for districts to plan for multiple scenarios. And so we're doing that. That's where we've heard feedback. We need more clarity around a hybrid model that's like an A-B day. When we were approaching this work, we were operating under the assumption as an administrative team that social distancing was going to be a requirement. And so that is not a requirement right now by the state. So that brought back into the conversation a fully in-person option. Social distancing, we had classrooms set up with 6 feet of distance between desks. And depending on the classroom you're in our district, some of our classrooms are a little bit smaller, so we can handle about 9 students. And I'm not talking about some smaller students where like you don't have that number of students speaking like a Title I reading room or something like that. But more just our regular classrooms, 9 up to about maybe 16. And so we knew that if social distancing was a requirement, we would not be able to get all of our students into their normal classrooms. on a daily basis. And so that's where we were talking very heavily about the hybrid option. Well, we're not required to socially distance. And so that's when conversations about masks start to enter the picture, because if you can't socially distance, as you know, we have linked into our Return to Learn plan, guidance from the CDC, the American Academy of Pediatricians. We have other sources, Iowa Department of Public Health. And so with that guidance, we know that there are some folks who are strongly advocating for when you can't socially distance, you should require masks, and some of the research behind that. So we anticipate as we go through this that when we get clearer guidance, specifically around quarantining, and then of course if anything comes down from the state, because there's certain decisions we can make, we can't, we can't make the decision like the governor does to close down schools. Obviously, if the governor shuts down schools, we go to an online format, required remote learning. And we would ask our staff members to be present during their normal contract hours to support the learning of students. And that's a change from the spring. If we have some variables in there, quarantining, we may shut down for a shorter period of time. It may be a longer period of time, depending on if the level of potential outbreak or exposure that we have. We're also operating from a standpoint of what does it mean to be exposed and who has to quarantine. So right now we're being told that's someone who is within 6 feet for 15 or more minutes. And that's the guidance from Iowa Department of Public Health is my understanding. I think that's coming from the CDC, and of course Warren County Health Services is providing that guidance to us. So all those things factor into which plan at which time we're going to have to implement. Is that fully online for everybody? Is it a hybrid model? Because we could still be in person, but maybe we have to socially distance, or is that fully in person, like the plan states right now? So we just have to, that's the fluid part of it. We just have to be able to move between, and that's why I've asked our teachers and I'm asking parents to start writing your own contingency plans. And how do you navigate through this? Because we can do many things to support our community, but we can't address every single personal situation. And so that's one reason we're offering in the plan a fully online option for some folks who can do that and feel more safe. They feel that's a more safe environment for their students right now, given the pandemic conditions.
Can I just ask a quick question? May I?
You need to fill out a form, right? Yeah. Can you?
Yeah, if you haven't,
I'll fill it out as I ask. I just want to understand what the push is to bring everyone back. I really do.
So what I would say is that the feedback we're receiving from our community is the preference is to bring students back in person. Now, is that 100%? No, it is not. The up to the minute feedback, well, I got to find it here first. Sorry about this. So our current feedback right now, and this is through the RTL plan draft, knowing what you know now about the NCSD Return to Learn plan draft, if our public health partners believe it is safe to allow in-person instruction, would you be interested in having your student return to school? So 47.3% yes. I'm certain my students would attend in-person instruction. 27.9, I'm likely to send my student for in-person instruction. 18.8, I'm unlikely to send my student for in-person instruction, and 6% no, I'm certain my student would not attend in-person instruction. And so I'm sorry, the board president has to recognize anybody that asks questions.
I'm sorry, I was writing. I'm sorry, who made that comment?
Are we going based on the board's rules or based on science? Because that really kind of didn't answer the question. I understand the survey that was sent out to parents. I filled it out. I know a lot of people didn't. Surveys garbage in, garbage out. Depends on who gets it and who answers. I want to know why the board's initial recommendation was completely stay home or completely go back.
So again, we're taking advice from different sources. So the American Academy of Pediatricians is one.
Well, why did you
who is recommending that. We also have recommendations that come down from the CDC, Iowa Department of Public Health, Warren County Health Services. And so take all that into account, plus the local community dynamics. And so I can't point to one piece of information that says this is why we should or should not come back, because we're trying to filter through all that information, and it's changed, and it is changing. And so as we've approached this work, these are the recommendations that we have landed on. Now, they're recommendations, and they're recommendations to the board. The board has not created that plan. This is a plan that's been created by our executive council, which is our Executive Director of Administrative Services, Kate Baldwin, Don Shiro, our Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, myself, our Human Resources Director, our Director of Student Services oversees students with IEP, special education, 504 plans. It is also informed by our Director of Technology. All of our principals are building principals. We spoke about this we had a 2-day administrative team retreat on June 25th and 26th. And our full administrative team, which includes our assistant principals, our student advocates, and our other directors, Director of Buildings and Grounds, Director of Transportation, Director of Nutrition, all have had this draft since June. And so we talked over that 2-day period. We didn't spend the whole 2 days on this topic, but we spent probably at least a full day between the 2 days. And so we have gone through, and again, we have multiple people looking at multiple sources of information. We have our nurses weighing in on the health and safety matters. And so all of that is feeding into our plan. So we're looking at science and then also basing it on community feedback. And so some level of preference, because if we had in this survey 100% of our parents saying we're not comfortable sending our students back to school, guess what? We would not be sending them back to school.
And I think DT brought up the point that this is the first presentation to the board in its draft form. I mean, so we haven't made recommendations. The board hasn't. The board's just reviewing it. This is our opportunity to ask more questions, and then we'll send it back, and they'll do some more tweaking to it, I guess, or adding to it. And then,
and I should say that the board has had this at the subcommittee level and had access to the plan as well. So we have had some subcommittee discussions about the Return to Learn plan.
But the full board, this is the first time the full board's had it on the agenda. And I believe our timeline is to review it at least again on the 23rd at our board retreat, and possibly do approval then. But if we feel like we need more information, we'll push it to our next meeting, which I don't know the date of that off the top of my head, the second week in August.
So Director Kelly, do you have a question?
Well, I was going to make a statement that I have reviewed the plan. I was on the subcommittee. And me as a parent and a mother and an adult with a husband that has asthma, I've taken into lots of consideration. And it's hard. When we asked 3-4 weeks ago, the situation in the state was completely different than it is now. Things have changed over in the last 2 weeks. So we are taking all of that into consideration. We are trying to get all the background that we can. And my feeling is to do what's best for the community. And I know in the plan there are different options, and there's lots of details behind those options that hasn't been shared yet. And we're just getting that out there, and that we are working through it, the best that we can, and we want to make the best choice that we can.
Director Fletcher.
Well, I was going to ask President Wright if we want to go back and ask for more public comments on this. Our procedures aren't an open dialogue, in standard practice to ask questions back and forth. Right. This is a meeting held in public. For our procedures and notes for Jake, we can, if you would like so moved, I can make a motion to go back to public comments. We can fill out the paperwork. We can have folks come up and ask their questions, for which this is the forum to do so, but our current procedures are not to be, playing tennis back and forth with questions, and actually from our policy for board members to be commenting on these open comments to the board.
Correct. So we have given the public their opportunity with the 3-minute time frame, and so I think at this point we will have to not have questions from the public and reopen that public comment. So at this point, though, I would like to ask the other board members if there are other questions. Brian or David, I don't know if you have specific questions or comments that you want to ask of DT and others on the table, around the table.
I think weighing in from a student's perspective.
Oh, yes, Patrick.
once the return to learn plan was like brought up, from a student point of view, there was many students across the board that I've spoken to who were all just really excited to get back to school and speak to their peers. And when it came to the mask issue, I found that I spoke to many students who were concerned about other students not choosing to wear masks. On the other side, I spoke to a lot of students who also felt that there wasn't a strong need to wear a mask.
Thank you, Patrick. Director Roush, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask about quarantining, and it sounds like you're still waiting on direction and guidance, and that's what a lot of this stuff is. The plan is fluid, and we're trying to figure it all out as we go here. But a flow diagram of some sort, because you get a lot of degrees of separation, and it's hard to understand clearly if you need to be quarantining or if you don't.
So this whole process feels like inclement weather days times a million. And so for anyone who wants to see how that all happens, you're welcome to join me at my house at about 4:30 in the morning this winter when we will have a weather event. And so the way that usually works is I monitor the weather the night before, and I get up and I see what's going on about 4:30 if the roads are good enough, because I frame that around if I'm a 14, 15, 16-year-old student whose car has been sitting outside all night, do I want that child driving to school on these roads? So we drive, transportation director of buildings and grounds, we go out and we drive the roads. And we have some protocols we follow. I talk to the superintendents. We drive certain areas that we know are rough spots. The S-curve, like I always personally drive the S-curve out in G14. And then the commonality we have between some of the districts for sure in the metro is we use a chart from the National Weather Service about wind chills. And so if we get to about 25 below zero, we know we're getting close to either calling school off or we need it to tip about 1 more degree, and we will for sure. And so having something like that is what we're asking for from Warren County Health Services. And so if you have like a student that tests positive for COVID, let's say, do you quarantine, let's say it's an elementary student, do you quarantine that classroom or do you quarantine the building? And so we're seeing some models emerge from around the country, and so we're putting some of that in front of the superintendents and the Warren County Health Services. This is part of the challenge for the state of Iowa. One of our speakers mentioned that 5 school districts have closed down baseball or softball today. And there have been a number of baseball and softball teams around the state who have been impacted during the baseball season and softball season. And so what we have seen happen is in one county, you have a positive test and that player has to quarantine off that team. Another county, similar circumstance, player tests positive and the whole team quarantines for 14 days. So kind of the position we're in right now in the state of Iowa is there's not that guidance coming down from the Iowa Department of Public Health, Iowa Department of Education. And so we're really up to local county health departments to guide us with that. And that's a long-winded answer to say we're working on it, quarantine procedures. But we're trying to get like a flow chart or a matrix that will help us make those decisions. And we have some consistency, at least in Warren County.
Any idea when?
So we have another meeting this week, and so I'm hopeful we can get at least a good rough draft going on that. And so again, we've got a proposal that we're talking about, and see if that's where we go.
And DT, would that be included in the plan, the quarantine matrix or whatever that document?
I think what it would, if we have that, we'll include it as a resource.
Okay.
Yeah, certainly. And the reason I would include that as a link to that is that if it does change, then we don't have to change it in the plan. Okay. It would automatically get updated, say through Warren County Health Services. But we want to try to get to where we're using the same type of decision-making process, at least in, again, Warren County. Mm-hmm. The other thing that's complicating this is that multiple schools, we're fortunate that we're only in Warren County as a district. There are multiple districts across the state that operate across more than one county. And so it's that which county do you go by then? Mm-hmm. Other questions? from the board?
I just had one DT on. Well, first of all, I just wanted to compliment you and the administrative team for the return to learn plan. I've spent considerable time reviewing it, and I find it to be very thoughtful, very thorough, but yet fluid in a very fluid situation. You know, in my daily life, there's people from the far, I won't use right and left, but this side and this side of this issue. And as you know, some of the hot button issues we've talked about tonight, and there's many more throughout this. And I just compliment the district on putting a plan together. If people in the room have not read that, I advise you to read every word of it because it's very thoughtful and does have a lot of contingency planning for a lot of different scenarios. I also look forward to the building plans that I believe are close to being published or being available at each building level. I know there's a lot of very smart people that operate in our buildings every day that have a lot of great ideas on how they can help protect kids and staff as well. And I ask everybody to keep an open mind until they thoroughly get through the plan. With that said, we're living in an environment where it feels like 1 week is about a year's worth of news. And certainly between now and the start of school, the proposed start of school of August 24th, is it? Any number of news incidents or numbers or things can change as they have in the last 3 to 4 weeks. So my question to you, DT, at this point is, I know we have a fluid plan, but how do you see the next 2 to 3 weeks unfolding in terms of some of these more nuanced issues of the plan? And then secondly, to that question would be the group that we had arranged as part of our committee outside of the district members. It appeared to me like we had some pretty thoughtful, luckily in the Norwalk district, some pretty bright people on this issue on that committee. And I feel like we had a good first shot with those people, and I'm very happy and thankful to them for their time. But I think we need more. I'd like to hear more of them as we get closer to the start of school. And then certainly, as we've mentioned, the Department of Public Health. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I need to follow the guidance of people who are. And I think the Department of Public Health of Iowa is who we all, which is in concert with the Department of Education. And then some of the group that you've assembled there, I think, have some very good things to offer this board and our district. So I'm just curious how the next 3 to 4 weeks will unfold in that respect.
So we're gonna reconvene that parent group, and so and my intention was after this discussion tonight was to reconvene that group. So we'll see if we can get them back together before the 23rd, but if not, for sure at least 1 to 2 times before we go back to school. So over the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to continue to monitor what starts to emerge from other school districts. We're going to continue to work with Warren County Health System and so our services and get answers to our questions. So we've started also, we have a Google Doc that we've started that we've asked questions from Warren County Health Services. And so they're going to start to answer those questions. And so I think that will help to inform us over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Every day I monitor the numbers across the globe in the United States and here in Iowa for COVID positives, testing numbers, and then also, of course, unfortunately, COVID deaths. And so we'll monitor that, and then we will see if we can have perhaps a representative or two at the retreat to address the board. And so, because we do have some very bright and thoughtful people who, again, are well versed in the healthcare industry in Iowa, whether it's a state agency or leading healthcare systems or doctors, so on and so forth. So that's how the next few weeks are going to go. We'll reconvene that group. We will, as we come out of this board meeting and our meeting tomorrow with the administrative team and the executive cabinet and the principals, I think we'll have some tweaks to the plan before it goes back to the board. We'll also be getting our nurses back together to talk about specifically the face mask issue and see if there's any changes in their recommendations from when they discussed this in early June, because there's obviously been a lot of information and changes in the whole pandemic between then and now. And so that's the way I see this playing out over the next few weeks, is monitor the situation, continue to meet with these focus groups. And by the way, when we met with our parent group the first time, the entire executive cabinet and all of our principals were invited to participate in that meeting as well. As listeners, really didn't say, I don't know if a principal or I think Don had a few words to say, I did during that, but it was mainly the parents talking to us and informing us as we went through this process. So that's the way I see this playing out over the next couple of weeks and involving that parent group.
DT, to go along with that, I know you said labor relations had met, and will we be getting maybe some more feedback from what their comments are?
Yeah, we will be sharing that information, the questions and answers to the staff questions. And we're getting HVAC questions, we're getting mask questions, of course, we're getting hybrid questions, we're getting, questions just about more of an HR standpoint. And then, yes, labor relations met. And for those in the crowd, we have a group that we call Labor Relations Committee Certified, and so it's a group of about 12 people, and the majority of those members are teachers or certified staff members who are covered by our collective bargaining agreement with our Norwalk Professional Educators Association, or Education Association. And then the other members on that are administrators. And so we have Sheila Taylor, who's Orchard Hills principal, Jody Radigan, who's Eastview principal, myself, Kate Baldwin, and Allison Cornwell, our HR director. And so we talked about the Return to Learn plan draft on last Friday as well with that group. And so we're having a lot of conversations. We're including staff members in these conversations. And we're including parents. We're taking the feedback from parents. And this is just an example. I gave the numbers earlier from our current survey, which we're still getting responses from. But in the spring or in June, when we sent out our initial Return to Learn plan, we asked, how safe do you feel about sending your child to school in the 2021 school year? And the responses were this, and they're different from the numbers I told you earlier. Very unsafe was 7.84%, moderately unsafe 18.7%, neither unsafe or safe 16.37%, moderately safe 35.45%, and very safe 21.64%. And so I think the numbers have skewed a little more towards the safe or moderately safe. But there's still a wide range, no matter what it was the early Return to Learn survey or the current one. There are still people that say it's very unsafe, and there are people that feel very safe. And there were 1,289 responses for that survey.
Okay. So with the building plans, can I ask another question on that? That will be included for the July 23rd meeting.
Yeah, so this week we're going to work with the principals tomorrow to start getting that information out specifically to the board.
And I know the details are in those plans.
There are some more details in those plans, yes. Yeah. So think about, if you have, our leader and me analogy, and you have that big jar, you put the big rocks in first. So the board is going to put those big rocks in first. And we've talked about that. And then you put in the gravel and then the sand and then the water, and you fill the jar up. And so the building plans are more focused on the gravel and the sand and the water. Now, for some people, something that we might consider a smaller decision is a big decision to them. Like, what's the lunch going to look like? That's what some people want to know about. But that's really best left to our principals at the building level to figure out a lot of those details and their implementation teams.
Well, and I just want to say thank you to DT and all the staff and the administrators and even now the staff that's reviewing it, teachers, to put this together in this format that we have tonight. And know that we appreciate your comments tonight, and I do encourage you, if you have further questions or comments, to fill out the survey or reach out to any of us via email, and we will continue to review and look at this and have it on our agenda at the next meeting. I don't want to move on to the next item if there are still questions or comments from board members. If not, I'm going to take that we can move on to the next agenda item. But again, I do want to thank everybody for being here tonight and providing your feedback and comments. And again, thanks to everybody that worked on this plan, because it's been, I know, a lot of behind-the-scenes work. And as a board member, I truly appreciate the hours that have been put into this draft plan at this point. So moving on to the next agenda item are the annual policy notifications. DT, that is you.
Yep, just any questions from the board? This is just an annual notification. So in our policy, we say we're going to notify, and primarily just for the board to review and see if they have any questions about these policies.
DT, strictly a notification, not a vote. It's just posting it, no vote is required for it, correct? It's just nothing's changed. It's the same
Yep.
as last year.
Yeah, it's just a notification. Yep.
Not a question necessarily on the policy, but are we in line to get our facility use plans from either Al or Tom McLaughlin, or just kind of is that on the agenda for August?
What do you mean, the facility use plans? The safety plan?
No, usually we've gotten a report about how many groups use this facility, the gyms, kind of the protocols, if we're changing policies in terms, this is the annual notice of use of that, but.
I'll make a note about just the numbers, but we don't have any requests to change the plan or policy regulations at this time. So it would only be those numbers, those usage numbers. Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, old business. Jake, I'll turn it over to you for the IASB legislative priorities.
Yes, thank you for sending me your responses, your top 4 list. If you guys could pull it up, I don't know if we are presenting, I can't see the screen. But we did not have a tie this year, which was good news to me. So we didn't have to vote twice. Our top 4 priorities, number 1 was the school funding policy. I won't go through all the details that are spelled out here. Number 2 was the supplemental state aid. 3 was mental health. And 4 was the standards and accountability. If you guys have any questions, I can answer those.
Apologize, Jake, on my question this morning. Usually top priority goes number 1, and you work your way down. So got 2 and 3 mixed up, and that's how closely I was working through. I was like, what do you mean, Jake, it's in the right order? No, the top one's not there.
That's okay. If there's no questions, we do need board action for these. Yeah. And then I will submit to ISAB.
Okay, great. Any questions, or everybody okay with that? Then we do need a motion to approve our legislative priorities for 2021.
I'll make a motion to approve the IASB 2021 legislative priorities.
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay, our legislative priorities have been approved. Kate, I'm going to turn it over to you for the $17 million general obligation bond sale.
Yeah, that was a very good experience. Before we invite Matt up, Mary Beth, I'm going to ask you if you would open the public hearing, if that's okay.
Yep, I will open the public hearing now on the general obligation bond sale. And we have no members present to speak to that. So
we've had no comments from the public on it, from the publication either.
No, yeah, no public comments. So we'll close the public hearing.
Okay, well, at this point, I think in this further ado, we're going to bring up Matt Gillespie here with Piper Jaffray. The Norwalk Community School District has worked with Piper Jaffray for well over 30 years now in handling our bond sales. For those of you here that are not aware of that, or our new board members, they actually advertise the bonds for us and receive the bids, assist me in receiving the bids on bid day. So at this point, Matt's going to review the information that we received today and recommend bond sale.
Yep, good evening, board. So I'm going to go over this packet that I think Kate printed and has there physically in front of you. Before I do that, just to reiterate what Kate just said, my name is Matt Gillespie from Piper Sandler now in Des Moines. And what you see on the first page there is the report of sale, just showing you the bids that were received. Those bids were taken this morning at 10 o'clock. Before I go through the bids, up in the heading, if you have a color copy, I'm not sure if Kate made it color, but in the heading, you can see that there is the Moody's rating. So we went through that process with Kate and Jake. They were interviewed by the analysts at Moody's, and they reiterated the same rating that you've had now for a couple years, the AA3 by Moody's, which is a very, very high rating. But you probably can get to the next highest rating, which would be AA2, but it will take a couple things. First of all, a couple more years of consistent property valuation growth, which is relatively certain to happen in your district, I think. But also, importantly, paying off some debt, which you've been doing, but of course, as you pay off debt, you have the need to continue to add more debt. So that's one part of the equation that probably isn't going to change quickly in the near future because your district is growing. As you look at the bids themselves, we look in the bottom right-hand corner of each section, what's called the true interest rate. That's how we determine which one is the best bid. So it's not simply looking at just the interest rate or the timing of the interest rate, but the fees are also included, etc. So that true interest rate bundles all of those things together to come up with what most people consider to be an average rate, but it's more than that. But for the board and lay people, it's, for the most part, it's an average rate. And you can see that the bid that was received, the best bid today, 1.96. And then in my handwriting there, you can see what two other schools issued bonds throughout this summer. Those two school districts were issuing larger than $10 million amounts, so they were not bank qualified, or what we say is not BQ. So those are more comparable to you than some of the other schools that have issued less than $10 million amounts. And you can see your rate of 1.96 bested those two districts, Clear Lake at 1.97 and Knoxville at 2.21. And your rate actually is probably even better than what it looks like because you have a very large principal payment in the 20th year. So it's not a level debt service, which you'll see as we go through this. So that skews things to the higher rate. So that 1.96 being only 1 basis point better than Clear Lake is probably in reality actually better than what it looks like. The other bidders, Northland Securities, KeyBank, UBS, and JP Morgan. If you go to the second page, you'll see the summary of sources and uses. Now keep in mind, this is only for today's bond sale. This is not for the entire amount of voter-approved bonds. There will be more bonds sold, very likely next year. So just today alone, you're issuing $17 million in new principal. There was a large premium of $411,000. We'll go over some details about that in a few minutes. But for the sake of time, I'm going to skip past some of the minutiae of it because your finance committee did already have a discussion about it. But if you want to ask questions, absolutely do so. The bonding costs and the underwriter's discount. The underwriter's discount was about 50% of what I had used as my estimate. Part of that is because I was being conservative, and part of it is because it was a very aggressive bid. And then the bonding cost, that was almost within about $1,000 of what we had projected. That includes your attorney, the rating agency, Piper, United Missouri Bank, the paying agent, and some other minor fees that are included in that as well. The most important thing, I think, for the board to take away is that number that's circled, and that's what can you spend from today. So that would be on architect's costs, construction costs, land acquisition, nuts, bolts, boards, whatever. So even though you're only issuing, not only, but you're issuing $17 million of principal, you actually have $17,194,000 to spend after you've paid all of the bonding related costs. So that comes into play because of that premium that you have there. The page after that just is a clean version of the new debt service. So you don't see any of your existing debt on this page, just today's bond issuance. And that's where you can see in that 20th year, that very large $3.5 million principal amount. And the reason that is there is because up till last year, you could only issue 20-year bonds out through 2039, so you don't have any principal in that 20th year, what is today the 20th year. So you're sort of filling in that gap in that 20th year with that large principal amount. If you go to the next page, this is where you'll see that bond pricing that details some things about the premium. Again, I'm going to skip that unless board members want to ask questions, which you certainly can, but that's what I said your finance committee has already gone through once before. The page after that is the debt limit. So this is actually probably, with the exception of just knowing that you got a great deal today, knowing that you're moving forward, this may be the next most important thing in this packet. Because your district in the last few years has been up against the statutory debt limit at various times. There's only a few districts in the state that are like that. That's because you are a growing district, needing to issue more debt, but it's also because historically you've been a low property value district per student because you haven't had a lot of commercial property value. Well, that is quickly changing, and that's a very positive thing for your community. So what we have had in the past, where you were limited at times in the amount of debt you could issue by the statutory debt limit, that is probably not going to be the case moving forward, knock on wood. But instead, you probably will at times be limited by the debt service levy limit, which is the $4.05 number that you are probably familiar with. So you see the top box there showing you, as of July 1, your statutory limit was $74.2 million, of which you have a considerable amount of debt outstanding, which allowed you to issue up to $18.3 million more between July 1 and next June 30th, of which, of course, today you're issuing $17 million out of that $18.3 million. You couldn't go all the way to $18.3 million because, as you'll see on another page in a minute, you're being limited by that $4.05. And then next year, that's just an estimate, the middle box, so we don't know for certain what your property value will be next year. So this is I'm not going to say it's a wild guess, but there's some educated guessing going on there. But it certainly won't be 100% accurate. And that's showing us that next year, after you have issued the $17 million, that's factored in here, you will likely have around $19 million in new capacity, of which you're going to issue another roughly $7 million, because that's the balance of the bonds that the voters approved. So as of next summer, as of next July 1, you subtract off that $7 million roughly from the 19, you could possibly have the capacity to issue another $12 million in debt. I don't think you have an immediate need to do that or desire to do it, but that is a very positive swing from where we've been over the last few years in the district. And then looking out 2 years from now, the $23 million, that would be after the remaining $7 million is issued and all of the voter-approved debt is gone, and you may still then have another $23 million in capacity that you could issue. The page after that is just the sources and uses, not just of today, but also of the estimate for next year when you issue that rest of the $7.3 million that voters have approved. So the things that are in that shaded peach-ish, yellowish color, I'm colorblind, those things are facts, but the things are just in black and white, those are the estimates for next year. So if those are reasonably accurate, you can see that up in the top, you could fund $24 million of new projects, plus you have $335,000 from the bonds today that are actually the very last tail end of what your voters approved several years ago. All of that debt couldn't get issued last year or the year before, so that's included in today's issuance, that $335,000. So the net amount you might be able to spend on total projects, $24,045,000, counting the surplus that's at the bottom of that top box. And of course, next year we'll know a little bit more. Well, we will know much more. We'll know the exact number. And it might be slightly more than $24,045,000, and it probably will not be less, but it may be a little bit more than that. The page after that, so this is the page that has the yellow column along the far right side, the first page at least. In the top right corner, you should see the number $891.8 million. That's the school district's current taxable valuation of property. And the takeaway here, this is just the same amortization schedule we looked at earlier, the same bond repayment schedule, but now along the far columns, you see the existing debt is included in there, as well as then the debt service levy calculation. So the first year, which is fiscal year 21, the year we're just entering, the board already this past spring had pre-levied a $4.05 tax levy, which is the most you could levy. So today, when we knew the exact result, we're able to push a little bit more principal into that first maturity to consume as much of that 405 as possible. But then you see the levy dropping, although it may not look like that big of a deal to you, it drops below $4.05. So today you actually could have issued a little bit more than just $17 million, but that's the maximum amount that you had put into the published notice of sale. So we don't exceed that, and we just leave the balance, which you see in the very, very bottom little skinny box, $7,335,000, that will be issued next year. And if you look at the next page, it says estimated across the bottom portion of that. That is just an estimate of what that $7.3 million might look like. And on that page, we are making guesses in the top right corner about your taxable property value at $1.1 billion, and we're making guesses about the interest rate. We have no idea where that rate might be a year from now. But if this is reasonably accurate, the good news is that you can issue the rest of that debt in 19-year repayment years, not 20, so you don't need that 20th year, although you could do that if you wanted to, but I don't think the board would choose to do that. And then also you can see that the tax levy just isn't really that close to $4.05 anymore. The first year it would be, because we would force that to happen, and then after that, the levy might be somewhere in the, depending on property values, it could maybe be as low as $350, maybe as high as $370, depending on exactly where property values come in next year. So, an estimate there. And then the last page is just the timeline. So you are almost at the end of this timeline, so you've already been going through this. Today the bonds are sold, or bids were taken, at 10. And tonight you are, I presume, here in just a moment, awarding to the best bidder, and then going through the process of legally issuing the bonds. And then the transaction will close on July 28th, which is when the proceeds will come to you. And Kate, today I did tell my staff that on the 28th, unless you told us something different, that money would go to City State Bank. So if you change your mind and want to go to IceJet again, just tell us in the next couple weeks. So any questions? That was a lot of information there for the board to consume. Questions about any page or any of the process or the numbers that you see there?
And Matt, I'm going to go back to, unfortunately, page 1 on you here.
Yep.
In discussion of the rating from
Yes.
Moody's, you were discussing what does that mean to go up a notch. In your professional estimate, what does that change? This particular deal we offered today, what does a notch up do to the pricing?
Well, to be honest, it probably wouldn't do much. You'd hear a lot of people in my industry tell you that it's going to save you a ton of money. Just like if you had, let's say, as a individual, you have an 840 credit score versus a 500 credit score, the bank is going to give you a different interest rate if they would lend you anything at all if you had a 500 credit score. So it's kind of the same concept. But in reality, for you to go to that next higher rating, yes, the interest rates may be slightly different, but I would say in the 5 basis point at most difference probably. Unless it was really heavily weighted to the long end or the short end, or of course unless there's some other very unusual thing going on in the economy again at that time. But for the most part, it's something that would be desirable for the district to have a higher rating. But you shouldn't go out of your way. In my personal opinion, you shouldn't go out of your way making that happen, because your job is to educate students, not necessarily to have the absolute highest credit rating you can have. Now, other people in my industry would say, well, you should have the highest credit rating because that's all they think about. But you are a school district. You're not a business, although you actually are kind of a business. You're run like a business. So I wouldn't go out of your way to try to do things just to make that rating higher. It's already one of the highest ratings in the state. Very few school districts in Iowa can get to that rating. So you're already at the rating that literally almost no one can get to. There's maybe 20 districts in the state that have a rating like that. And I don't know how many off the top of my head, but I would say there's maybe 2 that have a higher rating. Cedar Rapids, I believe, and West Des Moines, yeah.
I think depending on our enrollment growth, though, I mean, it's hard to postulate, but I think depending on our enrollment growth, and if we do see this accelerated commercial value growth, and the district does, like a lot Matt said, it's where you are with your appetite, and not say appetite, but need to continue to issue debt for more future projects. That's going to drive a lot of it.
Yeah, and much of it you have no control over.
Yeah.
You can be the best stewards of the community's tax money, and that itself is not going to get you anywhere necessarily. It's a combination of things, but the wealth levels of the district, so how much do people make per capita or make per household, those are going to be very important in these calculations, and you guys have no control over that other than the teachers that live in your district. I guess you could triple all their salaries and try to boost that number up, but you're not going to do that. So you really don't have any control over that. And you can't control the valuation of property. You can control your own house, you can remodel it or finish the basement, but that's not going to add anything meaningful to the district's property value. It's really commercial property that's going to make that difference over time.
I guess the only thing for Brian and Michelle, I think they're aware of too, that with the recent additions of Michael Foods, Windsor Windows, and then the Osmium project, we provided that information to Piper Sandler. I'll say that correctly this time. So when he says there's estimates, they do have those guaranteed. Well, there is not a guaranteed agreement with Michael Foods or Windsor Windows, but with Osmium. So those are figured in to figure future valuations.
Yeah, those are factored into those future estimates, like Kate said, and also a reasonable assumption of just the existing property that's already here. There is a factor factored in, but of course, there's no guarantee that that is going to happen, or it certainly could be much better as well. We hope it is better.
So Mary Beth, I guess at this point, if you have any more questions, I think we did go through quite a bit of this in detail. David and Justin are down there nodding their heads. Matt was very generous with his time, I guess it's been about 3 or 4 weeks ago already, and going over some of the options before the board. And I just don't think you could have asked for a better bond sale here. I mean, it's unfortunate these conditions we're in right now. They have had a little bit of a silver lining in this factor for the district. So that's, again, we don't wish these conditions, but it's been a very good time for the district to move forward with that particular bond sale. So at this time, if there are any more questions from Matt, then I'm going to turn it back over to Mary Beth, and we've got a resolution to actually approve, to actually issue the bonds then to Baird.
Kate, can I ask of a request of Matt and you and Jake? Could we get for the finance subcommittee in the future, basically a spreadsheet with each of the issues and all the debt service by year down to that 2040? Now that we have a
just the outstanding debt that you have.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, Matt has it.
Similar to this sheet, but obviously you can't put all the details in it. But just so we can see here.
I can send it to you tonight. We keep those internally. Matt, we go back and forth on those, so I can send you a spreadsheet tonight of both sales tax and general obligation. Yeah.
Because I think that's a topic for using the 405 in the future, and how do we look at maybe doing some pay down of debt through the callable features, but also as we plan the next stage of the 20-year facility plans, kind of seeing each year what does that mean. Obviously, you come to the board or to the subcommittee and say, here's what you can put in there to get a 405. But
those worksheets that Kate or that I can send you, they'll have also the call dates of each one of those, which is very important because that's going to determine when you can begin to pay them off or refinance them. You don't really have a lot of debt anymore that can be refinanced because it's all at such low interest rates. But I say that, and interest rates are so low now that there's things that couldn't be refinanced a year ago that are being refinanced. Yeah, but that call date also is going to show you, Justin, when you can write a big check to the district and donate some money and just let the district pay off the next issue of debt, too.
Yes, it's very helpful to know when those dates are.
I'm sticking my tongue out at you right now. You don't see that. So it's the one benefit of masks.
You'll also notice, too, though, on some of those schedules, you'll see where they've timed upcoming payments with the retirement of a debt to help pay off that principal, too. And Mary Beth is aware of that. But, yeah, we can provide those to you. So.
Okay, no further questions. We do need a motion to adopt the board resolution and approve the sale.
I'll make a motion to adopt the board resolution to approve the sale and issuance of the GEO bonds.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Oh, you have to have a roll call vote.
Roll call.
I'm sorry, you're right, thank you.
Yep. Director Albrecht.
Aye.
Director Fletcher.
Aye.
Director Kelly. Director Ruff.
Aye.
And President Wright.
Aye.
Okay.
So the board resolution has been approved. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, for board members, if you have other questions, as I always say when I come to these meetings, don't hesitate to ask. There's lots of things you don't think of tonight or that may come up later. Or if a community member asks you a question and you don't know the answer to it, which you certainly wouldn't be expected to, this isn't something you do every day, direct your questions to Kate or Jake, and they can find me wherever I'm at, usually, and get those questions answered no matter who's asking them, all right? Thank you. Congratulations. Good luck with the fall.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, the next item is construction projects. Kate.
Yeah, I guess I'll continue to use the microphone. With this, we've just got 3 actions that are require the board's attention tonight. The first one is completion of acceptance of a bid package, again, associated and with the secondary project. And again, everything has been completed with this work with the mechanical with L.A. Fulton. The board has taken substantial completion at various times based on the scope of work that was being done, because some of it was related to the high school, some of it was related to the middle school. So again, this is just, they've completed all their work, submitted all their warranties and other documentation. So we're ready to accept approval on that one. Mary Beth, if you don't mind, I'll just go with the others and you can take them all at once if you want.
That's what's going to be my question, so
Okay,
thank you,
yeah.
yes.
The next one's related to the Oviatt. These are their change orders, but they have what we call smaller change orders or midstream change orders that have all been approved by the board, except 2 in there. With the first one, with the bid package for the drywall, we had, in that situation, we had a bid allowance on bid day of $5,000, and we exceeded that by $49. Yeah. So quite a bit of that was related when the district decided to move forward and do a lot of additional painting at Oviatt and try and get that building up to parity. We laid heavily on this bid allowance. So we need approval for this, and the only change has not been before the board is the $49. The other one is related to general carpentry over at Oviatt, and we had an allowance of there of $15,000 for miscellaneous items. And if you looked on that on a page about 22, we used $13,115. That left a surplus of $1,885. So again, that was in the bid document as an allocation, so we have to approve that reduction to the contract by that amount. So you can approve these in one action if you want to. Or I'll take questions if there are any questions, but it's pretty straightforward.
Are there questions from the board?
I'll make a motion to approve the change orders as presented.
I'll
Okay.
second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the middle school, high school renovations and Oviatt renovation change orders and completion acceptance, final acceptance and completion have been approved. Sorry. And is there updates on the NPEC?
Yes, Mary Beth, with the conversations with Superintendent D.T. McGee and Mary Beth, we're going to leave this as a standing item on here. We don't have anything direct to present tonight, but as Justin and, as David and Brian talked, we'll be continuing to move forward with some subcommittee work, but we will see that as a standing item. So if there's any questions or something the board wants to direct during that time to any of us, please feel free.
When are we supposed to see another revision from them?
Right now, that will not come back until around the 1st of September.
Okay. I wouldn't mind seeing something, just a progress set from them,
Sure.
just so they don't get too far down one path without, because there were just a couple of questions that we had prior to, or when we released them for DD.
I guess I was thinking this, the subcommittee will see something sooner than
Okay.
that. Yeah.
All right, perfect.
And then we're also setting up late July, we're trying to get some tours now that the conditions have opened up with public exposure and getting into some facilities. We're hoping to get some couple board members and some user groups here at the high school in to actually view a prefabricated structure that's similar to what's being designed for the district. I don't have anything else to share tonight.
Okay, we'll move on to new business. The first item is a calendar revision, it looks like. Dawn, do you want to update us?
Yes. So we had some conversations about how we can actually maybe get some more instructional time for our students. And as at our admin retreat, when we started looking at that October 12th day, had a discussion about could we make that an instructional day. So through the retreat, the admin is recommending that we actually turn that day into an instructional day in lieu of having it as a professional learning day.
And I did run this by Siobhan. We have to have a public hearing.
I saw that.
This is the year of the calendar meeting, every meeting.
Are there questions for Dawn on this change? Sorry, I keep looking both ways. Okay, so we need to open the public hearing regarding the proposed change to the school calendar. And we have received no comments, correct, Jake? Okay. So I'll close the public hearing. And then we would need a motion to approve the school calendar change for 2020-21 with October 12th being a student instructional day.
I'll make a motion to make October 12th, 2020 a student instructional day.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And Jake, we'll do a roll call?
Director Albrecht.
Aye.
Director Fletcher.
Aye.
Director Kelly.
Aye.
Director Roush.
Aye.
And President Wright.
Aye. The proposed the calendar change has been approved. The next item is the annual appointment of board officials for 2020-21 school year. And we have, do you want to go ahead, DT?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty self-explanatory with board treasurer and school business official Kate. We do the secretary actually at our annual meeting, so that's already been done. And that'll happen again in November. Legal counsel, Allers and Cooney, general legal matters, and then Dorsey and Whitney, LLC, bond attorney, and other finance matters. Level 1 and 2 harassment investigators. Eric Neeson and Jody Radigan is the backup. That's for harassment. And then for our level 1 investigations, which is for a staff member who's abused a student, Eric Neeson, level 1, and police chief Greg Staples, or his designee is the level 2. And then equity coordinator Allison Cornwell and Title IX coordinator Allison Cornwell.
Okay, so we need a motion to approve these annual appointments. Are there any questions prior?
I'm assuming the motion has to then list those, Jake? Probably.
Can you do as presented? Yeah, that's why it is in that one
Yeah,
agenda
yeah,
item.
you can just say
Justin.
the board officials as presented.
Yeah. Is that your motion, Justin, or did you make a motion?
I was making sure if anybody had questions, they had that opportunity. I was just clearing how you wanted it presented.
Yep.
For the minutes.
Yep, you can do one motion.
I'll make that motion to approve the appointment of board officials as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the annual appointment of board officials. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the annual appointments of board officials has been approved. And then we have the official newspaper for legal notices.
The North Warren Town and County News.
Okay. So we do need a motion to approve this as well.
I'll make a motion to approve the official newspaper as the North Warren Town and Country News.
Second the motion. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The official newspaper for legal notices has been approved. DT, you're next to with the training on the suicide prevention strategies.
Yeah, so this is our annual training. This is a model motion that was suggested by Christy Latta last year, and so would encourage the board to make the same motion again this year. Still finalizing details, but Eric Neeson, Allison Cornwell, and I are working to make sure this happens, and I believe it's going to be in person this year. Last year it was online.
And you don't have a date yet for that?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay.
Yep. But we're getting that plan finalized, and so definitely it'll happen again this year.
Any questions on this?
And again, the model motion is linked in the agenda. And let me do this. I'll read it off, and then someone can say I move.
Mm-hmm.
So I move that the district shall provide annual training on suicide prevention, postvention, and adverse childhood experiences, response mitigation strategies for designated school personnel as required by law. The district administration is authorized and directed to determine the protocols for such training as necessary and appropriate, the content of which shall be based on evidence and nationally recognized best practices.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the suicide training. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that has been approved, the training and suicide prevention.
Brian did.
Brian did. The next item is the first reading of the job title changes in board policies.
Yeah, before we go to the second reading, I'll make sure that I have a list of all the board policies are modified before doing that work. I just want to make sure that we had approached this the same way when Dawn and Amy's titles changed. And so Siobhan Schneider, the attorney at ISB, said we could approach it this way, where we just make one change, and then I'll bring those back. But if we have that approval from the board, make sure I give you a list of all the policy changes that are affected by this job title change. And it would be Director of Continuous Improvement to Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, Director of Academic Services to Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, and then add assistant principals, because we've modified our student advocates to assistant principals at the elementary.
So was there any place in board policy that we needed to go back to curriculum directors? Because now or maybe that's not their new title, but
The curriculum, I'll take a look at that, and if so, I'll make note of that and bring it back for the board, and we'll do a first and second reading on that as well. Yep. The curriculum and assessment facilitators.
It's all you, Don. Maybe all of this is now your work.
Are there handbook changes required?
Excuse me?
Are there is that in the handbook too? Are we going to have to change that?
I'm sorry.
The employee handbook.
Oh, the employee handbook. I don't think so, but we'll double check on the employee handbook too.
Okay.
Could be in the student handbook though, DT.
Oh, I'm sorry, Justin, go ahead.
I said there could be some in the student handbook because of escalation in different reporting periods with more so the assistant principals. But
I think on the elementary side, I think we got that changed, but we'll double check the handbooks.
So if I'm clear on this, I just want to make sure. We have in the agenda that we're changing it in the board policies, but you're going to also check handbooks? Yeah. And would that be a first reading then if you bring that back to us?
Yeah, we would have to do that separately.
Yeah, okay. I want to make sure.
So you want a motion on this first?
Yes, unless, are there other questions? Michelle, are you okay now?
I do have one question. So some of the advocates, is all of their job titles changing at this point? Or because I thought it was staggered?
Just the elementaries. And
Okay.
so there are some policies where it says advocates and we need to add the word assistant principals. And then when we convert over all the secondary staff, then we'll eliminate that student advocate language at
So it's more of a
future year.
And or?
Yes, it'll be and or, yep.
Okay, so now we do need a motion to approve the first reading.
I'll make a motion to approve the first reading of the job title changes in board policies as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have motion and second. All those in favor of the first reading of job title changes in board policies, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the first reading of job title changes in board policies has been approved. Okay, the next item is we now would like to move to closed session. So we need a motion to do that.
Do we want to make a motion to take a break before going into closed session?
Good point. Yes, let's do that. And then, let's see, I show, what, 7:55, is that correct? Yes. How about a 10-minute break?
That'll be fine.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for dealing with our harassment.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for coming.
Good to see you. I like the haircut.
Am I out of here?
I don't know that you go to.
Come back. Back here. Talk about it. You need to get enough mic stands when you do a form like this. You don't have to hold the mic, you can just have it on it. Hey, Patrick.
Patrick, I'm sorry.
Would you like to go over it right now? The all staff. So I thought it was a really good idea having like three parents who African American. I liked the form in the previous years. I think that form works great. Then when it comes to the word, I had a couple of ideas. I want to know your thoughts about it. So I was thinking along the lines of doing like the word like community or unified because like diversity like brings people together as a community. But then I was thinking like what the word that could do that. I think the word one. So it'd be like I think I can make like a video. It'd be like one, then like another word to transition in. It'd be like one team, one family, one learner. Yeah, so the word's one, but then there's like, we're one team, we're one family, we're one community. Yeah. So I can make the video for that. I made like a rough draft of it. what are the next steps going forward? Yeah. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So from this standpoint, we'll just start going back and forth on the presentation. Yeah. And so, and then you make your video. So I think it'll be a little bit on our part. So I'll kind of let you know what I think. All right. Or think about it. Okay. And then we'll have. So I can text her right now. Yeah, so like the word would be one, but then if you can cycle that in, yeah, one team. All right, yeah, thank you for having me tonight. They did a really good job handling that.